Chronic absences in our nation's school have nearly doubled compared to pre-pandemic levels. That's according to a recent Stanford University study. 40 states and Washington, D.C. saw increases in the share of students missing 10% or more of the school year. Nearly half of students in Alaska and D.C. were chronically absent. As we've previously reported on this program, the poor attendance findings come as student test scores have declined in reading, math, history, and civics. For more, let's bring in the study's author, Thomas Dee. He's the Barnett Family Professor at Stanford University's Graduate School of Education. Thank you, Professor, for being with us. So why are more students missing this increased amount of school during the school year?
Well, the short answer is we don't know right now, but these new data should be a call to action to better understand what those sources are. And one really prominent conjecture has to do with the indication that our youth have really fallen into a kind of mental health crisis during the pandemic. And that may be a factor that's limiting their motivation and their engagement in school, and is evidenced in a near doubling of our chronic absenteeism rates as students return to in-person instruction.
And so how does that then, being chronically absent for the school year, affect a student, say, down the line, and the compounding effects of this?
Well, it's fundamentally important. I mean, there's an old joke that the best ability is availability. For kids to learn, they have to be in the building. And that's why states and school districts monitor chronic absenteeism so broadly throughout the nation. But it's also important because we're undertaking a really expensive and important effort to address the substantial learning loss that occurred during the pandemic. And if kids aren't in the building to experience the kinds of supports that are being introduced there, those efforts aren't going to be as effective as we need them to be.
And so the problem of teen mental health is obviously a big and sprawling one. What are some of the solutions that are being used to address this?
Well, this is the one silver lining in this otherwise set of sad news, is there are evidence-based proven strategies for promoting attendance. And they begin at a most basic level of trying to engage parents and families when their kids start missing school. And it's been shown this can be done in low-cost, scalable ways, simply by texting families about their kids' attendance patterns or sending them postcards. And then maybe scaling up to more intensive approaches, actually visiting homes or providing key supports that might address the barriers that are keeping kids from showing up in the building. There are tiers of intervention that show we have the tools to address this crisis.
And is this the kind of thing, it's happening across the nation, so can it be solved? And are there disadvantages to solving it at the national level, or is this a state thing? And is there one way that's better than another for addressing this?
I think we need particular leadership from both the federal government and the state government. I think school districts are actually running schools, and they're important partners in this, but their capacity to resource the kind of efforts we need and to avail themselves of technology, like ways of communicating with parents through texting, might be a little beyond their capacity. So there's a role for leadership at the state and federal level to help scale up these kinds of interventions and to make sure districts and schools have the resources necessary to implement them.
So now, just on a very broad sense, aside from the attendance challenges that we've been talking about, is there anything else that stood out to you about the post-COVID educational landscape that we should keep an eye on, or that you're keeping an eye on?
Well, you mentioned the learning loss, and I also mentioned the mental health crisis. I think what the chronic absenteeism data are telling us is there is a large-scale failure for many of our students to re-engage in instruction as we've returned to some type of normalcy. The other emerging indicator I would flag, though, is while we're seeing all of these different indicators of negative outcomes, we're also seeing early evidence that high school graduation rates are rising. So there are a number of emerging questions about what's going on there. Are standards shifting? Are grading norms shifting in a way that students are being advanced across the stage without meeting the academic standards they met prior to the pandemic?
Professor Thomas Dee from Stanford, we appreciate you going through these data with us, and thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.